Hi, I'm Nandan. I live in Mumbai and I am a fan of Manchester United.
Hi Nandan,
Hi, Sean.
how you doing? Was the coconut water nice?
It was quite pleasant. Some might have spilled somewhere. I don't know who did that.
We'll find out soon enough.
Soon enough.
So tell me, how and why Manchester United?
Manchester United, for me, it's at least been slightly a family thing.
Okay.
In that, when I was old enough to start watching and following football, my father had been an avid fan for decades, and he's the one who introduced me to I used to play football on the streets like most kids, but he's the one who introduced me to watching football. And in fact, I think there were a couple of other kids in the building as well, and he introduced them to Manchester United as well, and so we became a little Manchester United fan club just in our little building. And like I think the Premier League came a little late to India anyway, so we sort of grew up with initially with stories of apart from stories of countries at the World Cup, the club we used to hear about most often was Manchester United.
So tell me, what is the earliest memory of the club?
The earliest memory of United is I don't remember like many of the details, but it was just this sort of flowing counter-attack move that ended with I think Nistelrooy, Nistelrooy just sort of chipping the keeper final uh, at the last, just as the keeper was rushing out. Though the one that I do remember reasonably clearly was again a Van Nistelrooy memory where he was playing against Sunderland. He received the ball on his chest, executed one of those lovely little turns, and then just fired it into the back of the net. And it was one of those classic shots where he hit it so hard that when it hit the net, the ball was still rising. So the keeper had absolutely no chance of stopping it.
Are you someone who's interested in the history club? Do you look it up, read up?
It's very on and off. In that, like when I started following United, I didn't really, I wasn't really that much into the history of the club. And to be fair, like even once I started following it, it was very on and off. It was only as I grew older that I started to grow closer to the club. But otherwise, earlier, it's always just nice to support a team. And this is the team that had been passed down to me.
So you mentioned Giggs as club legend. Actually, you didn't just mention Giggs, you wrote Giggs, Giggs, Giggs.
Yes. Giggs was the constant. Like, as much as Alex Ferguson has always been a part of Manchester United and an essential part of Manchester United as far as I was concerned. It's the same with Giggs. You know, some games he didn't play, but he was always the one who was tearing up that left hand, tearing up that left flank, and he would just do it so well, and he made it look so easy. And it's just it's that some of that classical looking dribbling where he just the tiniest little jink and he'd just find a way through about two or three players. I mean, most famously in the
I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up, but yeah.
FA Cup final against Arsenal. That was some moment, definitely. But it was, I remember him more along the, like, it's not one specific moment, but just the thing of him running along the touchline, the left touchline, where he'll be going he'll be shielding the ball a little bit. He'll do a little jink and he'll get past the opposing winger who's trying to take him down, and then there'll be the fullback, and then them he'll either pretend to cut in and then just quickly go ahead or do a little Cruyff turn and turn it back in, and just the variations were endless, and he just always made it look so easy. And the amazing thing is that even so, he's had an unusually long career for like most footballers, let alone a winger. But even back then, it was just that he would always just keep going. I mean, and like now you look back at it, and he has the most assists. Like in terms of numbers, he has the most assists of anyone in the Premier League history, and I think he was only till recently he had the most appearances in the Premier League, and he started playing before it was the Premier League.
Right.
So that just shows just the massive span of his career. And again, more than anything else, the biggest thing was that he was a joy to watch. Like Beckham had these. Beckham on the right was it was great watching him, and he had these beautiful crosses, and he would make these lovely long balls. And later on, of course, the thing a lot of people remember him for is the half line goal and and the free kicks. But I always I loved players who dribbled and went through the team much more than just the pinpoint those who could deliver pinpoint crosses. So it's this odd hierarchy of dribbling and then through balls and then at the end there is crossing because it just looks so much nicer when a player leaves the opposing team in the dust and struggling to keep up.
Who is the biggest rival for Manchester United?
Liverpool,
Liverpool?
yes.
I would have thought City.
I mean, Liverpool were Manchester United before the Premier League. As a Liverpool supporting friend in school never failed to remind me, they were the most successful club. It's a weird, difficult thing. Just as it's a weird thing when Manchester United and Arsenal play, and I like the way Arsenal play, but I support Manchester United. Similarly, it's weird balancing the two rivalries of City and Liverpool. But I think Liverpool fans would be unbearable if they finally won. I think that is the straw that tilts it in favor of City.
So you played football as a kid.
Yes.
Was there someone you tried to emulate?
Not I don't think there was anyone in particular. Like I was a big fan of wingers like Ronaldinho and like Messi later on, but I was never skillful enough to manage things like those. So instead, I essentially used to play as a right-footed left fullback. I was never very good. I was fine without the ball, they say. But once you with the ball, I was not one of those players who would dazzle you with the ball at their feet. So that way, I would not have been too bad, I say, as a defensive midfielder in the current football setup where I'm good without the ball. But once I get the ball, I will just try and get it away from me as fast as possible, whether that's through a short pass to a more competent player nearby or just a long punt up front.
So I'm going to ask you now about players who you think didn't get their due while at the club.
Uh, Again, my this is very much a personal thing, but I think my favorite players who didn't quite get the reception and the respect that they should have were Carlos Tevez, and Dimitar Berbatov. So, and that was kind of both of them were there around the time of that Ronaldo was just coming up. So he was like clearly very talented and exciting young prospect. And it was also just when Rooney was coming into his own as the great English hope. Because when Rooney came to United from Everton, he was still very young. He joined United, I think he was about 17 in 2004 or so. And then around 2008, which is about when all of them combined. And like, that was 2008-9 was a big season for us. Our sort of front three there were Ronaldo, Tevez, and Rooney. And of those two, you can clearly see how Tevez would be sidelined. And Tevez was always one of those. It's an interesting combination of hardworking and talented. In that he did a lot of the things that he did were not the attractive, creative things an attractive creative striker would do. Like he could fight and duke it out with a tough center back. But he was also just capable of these beautiful turns where he'd take two or three defenders out of the game before touching the ball, just by the way he moved his body. And then with a little touch, he'd just get away from all of them. And similarly, Berbatov sort of came in once Ronaldo had left for Madrid.
That was 2008?
2009. Again, so I think, 2008-9, and then after that, Ronaldo was the most expensive player in the world, and we sold him cheap. But yes, Berbatov came in, and then it was still very much about it. It still felt like, then we had to sort of, because Berbatov came in from Spurs, and we felt we had to keep the United soul running. So we
Mm.
still had all the we had our faith in Scholes and Rooney, and the Scholes loved Berbatov for the same reasons that many of the fans loved him, was that he could fire a long ball from anywhere at the pitch, and Berbatov would just bring it down like he was holding a baby. Berbatov could run carrying a baby on one foot, and the baby would not wake up. He had the best first touch in the business.
Yeah.
It was sublime.
The era is defined by one player. I think right now most people would define it as maybe the time of Messi. What do you think it was for you in that time when you were growing up?
Mm, there's always a couple of players though, but I think like the sort of prime hit the spot when I was really sort of getting into football was Ronaldinho,
Hmm.
because is that time when he was just moved, like he had before he moved to Barcelona, he was already known from the Brazilian national team for the tricks he did, and it was essentially because of him that like FIFA released FIFA Street, the video game, and just he was clearly having so much fun.
Yeah.
Like, and everyone kind of wanted to be like him. It says something that he was the most popular player in the world at around the time that Jose Mourinho bringing about the complete transformation of football through defensive organization, like first at Porto and then at Chelsea. But at that time, I think that Ronaldinho was the most, he was the biggest player at the time.
We talked about a lot of players and positions, but there's one we haven't spoken about is the goalkeeper and De Gea.
Yeah.
Is he legend already? Legend?
Let me put it this way. Since coming to United, he has been United's player of the year almost, I think, every year but one. And he has been the Premier League goalkeeper of the year, I think, again, every year but one. He's up there.
Yeah.
Like he may not be quite as say good with his feet as an Ederson or an Allison, but in terms of like just as a keeper, it's hard to get better than him. Having said that, he's been having a bit of an off year this year where he's made a few mistakes. Though I think those have been more for country than for club, for which we are non-Spanish Manchester United supporters are thankful.
Yeah.
But at an everyday level, he is very good. And once in a while, he will pull out these performances that are just astonishing. He is, I still think he's the best keeper in the world.
Is there any young player who is not getting his chance right now?
I can't wait for Andreas Pereira to get a little more experience, because he was very good when he was on loan at Valencia, and he showed that he had a lot of potential. But I think in the current setup, there's too much better competition. Like he cannot compete against a Martial or a Rashford, and he prefers to play more centrally, in which case the attacking midfield berth is almost by default taken up by Pogba, in which case he's nowhere near as good a defensive midfielder as Nemanja Matic, and he's not a defensive midfielder. So I'd like to see him either on the wings or just in central midfield or attacking midfield. The other is McTominay. I mean, whatever you want to say about the complete disaster that was Mourinho's final season at United, he knew that he saw that McTominay has the potential to become a very good defensive midfielder, which is why even under Solskjaer, McTominay continues to get more chances per match. And Matic is old and not as mobile as he used to be. McTominay is good enough to fill in at that base of midfield or as a part of a midfield pivot.
So Nandan, thanks for being on pod.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for having me.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I'm just hoping we get like a good defender. That if nothing else, a good defender who lasts 3 or 4 years, and that none of our young players are tempted away to bigger clubs. It's astonishing it's a little disorienting as a United fan from the late 90s and the early 2000s to say we are worried about bigger clubs, and yet such is the state of global football that there are offhand at least about 5 football clubs who could be who could say be considered bigger as than Manchester United as things stand. So I can't wait for us to get back into that, like the biggest clubs in the world.
In 2006, Ronaldinho was the biggest thing in football, and I was a big fan. So at the time I had an uncle who was a Liverpool fan, who was working in England, and my father was going to England on work, but he would meet him. So asked if I wanted anything. I told my uncle that I wanted a Barcelona Ronaldinho number 10 jersey. Several weeks had passed. My father went to England. He watched cricket matches and just wasted a lot of time, honestly. And by the time he came back, he said, yes, I had got what you had asked for. And instead of a Barcelona Ronaldinho number 10 jersey, I got a Brazil number 9 Ronaldo jersey. I was initially disappointed, but looking back on it now, I'm pretty happy with it.